owner of this estate wants every single building moved to an identical position half a kilometre away. Can a team of engineers meet this extraordinary demand?
If they're not the way they are today, then it's different.
The owner of this house, crammed in the centre of town, wants to move it to a larger lot in the countryside. Can movers haul it 30 kilometres without wrecking the streets? The teams face danger on the roads.
Get over!
And ferocious storms. Two huge historic homes. Two teams with a mission to move. Two tough endeavors that will test the nerves of the people who dare to risk huge moves. Historic buildings often have to move to keep up with life in the 21st century. This abandoned church will find a new life as a theatre in a different town. While this old railway depot is being hauled away from the trackside to become a museum in a historic park. Occasionally, a building finds itself standing on a highly prized piece of land. Rose Heet's family have occupied this farm estate on the outskirts of St. Louis, Missouri for over 100 years.
It was passed down through the generations from my great-grandparents to my grandparents, from my grandparents to my mother and my uncle, and finally to me.
It's very much more than just a piece of property. It's family.
In 1959, a highway was built across the family farm, turning the land into prime real estate. For 3 decades, Rose has been fighting off developers who want to build a shopping mall on her family's home. In a final attempt to persuade her, developers offered to move Rose's farmstead to a new location.
I guess the debate was if the opportunity arose that we could move the homestead and preserve it, then that was the decision that needed to be made.
Rose agreed to the move with one extraordinary condition: that every historic feature on the estate, from the dilapidated barn and numerous outbuildings, to the farm's sophisticated alarm system, 130-year-old fence, even the disused toilet, should all be moved with the main farmhouse and be realigned on the new site in exactly the same position.
I thought it was important that all the buildings be as they are today, because if they're not the way they are today, then it's different, and it's not the same homestead as it was on the location we are today.
They will relocate the entire farm complex half a kilometre to the east. Behind the mall, they will build a mound to conceal the development from Rose's view. Moving all the buildings, including Rose's 400-ton stone farmhouse, will be an immense challenge for mansion mover John Matyiko.
The first way you could move this building is if you took it into sections. You took the one rectangular section and you cut it, and then you took the other rectangular section. Did that, you're cutting through all of the roof system, the plumbing, the electric, the plaster. It's not a viable option because of the time constraints that this move is on. The second way this building could be moved is brick by brick, slate shingle by slate shingle, roof truss by roof truss. But again, that's an option that the homeowners would never even consider because of the massive amount of disassembly and reassembly.
It took movers in Stockton, England, an entire year to relocate this church, brick by brick, away from a noisy railway line. They hauled it 25 kilometers to a more tranquil location. Anxious to spruce up its grimy exterior, they reassembled all the walls inside out. John has just 4 weeks to complete the farmhouse move, so is rejecting this time-consuming option. This leaves him with just one high-risk strategy: move the entire homestead intact.
It's a masonry building. It's 16 inches thick walls. Estimated weight around 600 tons. It's going to be a difficult and challenging move.
Whilst Rose is relocating her home to maintain its views, the owner of this historic house in Nova Scotia, Canada, wants to swap her view for a more attractive vista. Dr. Catherine Finlayson runs a veterinary practice in the east coast fishing town of Pictou. She's fed up with the 30-kilometre commute from New Glasgow, but is reluctant to leave her 100-year-old home.
I have to be very close to where I work because of situations like emergencies. And I actually had tried to sell this house for probably about a year, and nobody really was interested in buying it. One, because it was quite large. Two, because it was right on the street. And three, I think, because of how close it is to all of the other homes. So there's not a lot of privacy anymore. And I just really, really liked this house and thought there's no way I'd ever be able to build one that would look just like it. So I thought, well, I will look at possibly moving it.
To transplant her townhouse to the country, Catherine's called in local house mover Jason Leil. He's working out how to move the huge wooden structure.
We got 3 different options to moving a building of this size. Our first option would have been if we were out in the country or somewhere where we had a lot of space, we could move the whole building in one piece.
Moving the house intact is the best way to preserve its character and integrity. But this is only possible if the route is unobstructed. This 4-bedroom home in Illinois is moving across the road in a single piece. There's plenty of space and just one set of wires in its path, so the move takes under an hour. But the streets of New Glasgow are packed with obstacles.
If we didn't have to move a lot of wires, we didn't have to move a lot of poles and everything, it would be a great option. We'd put it on our trailer and we'd go with it, but just due to the location, that's not gonna, we had to eliminate that option. Second option to moving a house of this size is we could tear it apart.
Wooden structures are often dismantled plank by plank to move long distances. This 160-year-old windmill was disassembled and shipped from Denmark to Iowa for preservation. The 2,000-piece jigsaw took a team of 300 people more than a year to put back together. Dismantling Catherine's 3-bedroom house would take even longer. So Jason has only one option left: to cut the house in half. The man who will dissect it is carpenter John Stoddage.
Well, this house was built in 2 pieces. We have the main part of the house here, and then this smaller piece here is kind of built onto it. We're going to cut it in this area here and take this smaller piece. We've decided to cut along this wall for the simple reason that if we were to cut through the middle, it would leave floor joists from both sides sagging and need support. So the whole house would just kind of, tip in the middle.
The team is making 2 incisions through the house. The first one is vertical. They'd like to slice the building in half to minimize the width of each piece and make the move through the tight streets easier. But cutting directly down the middle severs all the floor beams, jeopardizing the structural integrity of the house. A less risky strategy is to cut the building just off to the right, bracing each open section with wood for support. This maintains the building's rigidity, but makes the move of the bigger piece of the house more difficult.
Horizontally, we're going to cut the 2nd floor below the windows. More important than anything, I think, is the size of the piece, just to make sure that our height remains somewhat the same in the 2 pieces.
The second cut will be horizontal, slicing through the house just under the first floor windows. This preserves the windows that are old and fragile, but makes the top half slightly taller than the bottom. And the cut line causes problems inside the house too. It passes through the staircase, banister, and upstairs door frames, which will need removing before the team can dismantle the house.
Nervous about the floors and the banister and the fireplace. And I told them that from the beginning, that if they thought that the floors were going to get wrecked or the fireplace mantle or the banister, that I may not even be interested in moving it.
With over 400 pieces of woodwork to strip out, they devise a coding system to keep track of where everything belongs.
Well, each piece we're individually marking. Upstairs we've been labeling them with B's, and downstairs we've been using letter A.
Removing the woodwork is not their only task. All the water pipes need disconnecting too.
So within the building we have pipelines from each radiator, we have pipelines from toilets, to bathtubs, sinks, washing machines, dishwashers. So we alphabetically categorized so we know what job that pipe actually did, and numerically we know in what position of the building it's located.
There are over 30 meters of pipework concealed inside the walls and floors, weaving in between the sections to be cut. All need to be mapped out and removed before the house can be pulled apart into 4 separate loads. They cut away the wall plaster to reveal the wooden skeleton that they will dissect.
The bottom 4 feet of all the walls on the second story open so that it'll make our cut a lot easier and we can see anything that might be in the way. So as we come around the wall here, of course, we're going to try and cut below the window somewheres in this area so that we don't have to take the windows out.
Looks like a big tornado hit it.
The radical surgery comes as a shock to Catherine.
This is a mess. This is very sad. I better fix it.
Back in St. Louis, the team are beginning the daunting task of relocating Rose's historic farmstead. Their first challenge is to map out the positions and elevations of every historic feature on the farm.
All right, boss, we got an 812 here, 812.
They plant a grid of markers around the grounds and precisely locate each one with GPS. They plot the corners of each building across the grid, creating an accurate map of the foundations. They transfer the grid to the new site and use it as a reference to replot the foundations so each building can be perfectly realigned with the others.
1830?
Rose would like to be able to look out her kitchen window and see the barn in the same place, and from the porch see the milk house and the steam shed in the same place. She wants the orientation of the sun, wants the sunlight to come in the windows the same way. So it's going to be picked up and moved some 1,700 feet to the east.
And it's not just the positions of the buildings they are recording.
Think there's any way that we could take this walnut tree with us?
Rose has called in landscaper Leanne Terry to move her entire garden as well.
Some trees can be moved. Some trees that have a fibrous root system to them are better candidates basically than this walnut. It has a taproot that goes straight down instead of a lot of a fibrous root system that helps hold the root ball. So you would basically be killing the tree because it would not be able to receive any water, any micronutrients or macronutrients which the tree needs to live.
Trees like elm and maple can be moved. They have wide fibrous roots spreading out just below the surface of the ground. They can be raised on a steel rig and hauled to a new site by crane for replanting. But walnut trees are different. They have a deep taproot stretching up to 2 meters into the ground. These can be too long and sensitive to remove intact. And some trees are just too old to move.
The age of trees makes a huge difference. And with this tree itself, it's probably close to about 100 years old, which trees are basically a lot like people. Whenever we're 40, we don't mind change. Change is adaptive. We can adapt to that. Whenever we get about 70, we don't adapt quite as easy. Typically, trees that are about 70 years old and older do not adapt nearly as well as younger trees do.
Leanne is labeling over 300 specimens to keep track of their original position. She has to replant them all at the new site in the same orientation. Meanwhile, John's preparing to move the 5 outbuildings. Each one poses a different problem. He's sizing up the rickety barn first.
On this building, or any barns, in many cases, they're tougher to move than a house because there's no actual flooring system to tie the building together. And it is a sprawling barn. It's 68 foot long, it's 37 foot wide.
Inside, the barn is divided up into a series of hollow chambers. The walls are falling away from the roof and dirt floor. If they were to lift the barn up unsupported, the inside would collapse. So they're installing a network of wooden cross braces inside to tie the walls and roof together for the lift. The milk house is also structurally weak. Its walls are built from 2 layers of brick. Over the years, the 2 layers have become separated. The exterior walls are falling outwards, while the interior walls are caving in. To prevent the milk house from collapsing, John's installing 2 networks of bracing. Wooden cross struts inside the milk house hold the interior walls rigid, while steel cabling prevents the exterior walls from falling away. Together, these hold the milk house rigid for the move. Braced and bolstered, the exodus begins. Hydraulic jacks prise the outhouses off the dung-encrusted ground. With a truck on the front and wheels under the rear, they drive the buildings half a kilometer to the new site.
1 down, 5 to go.
The machine shop is particularly fragile.
I'm just trying to go as easy as I can because this is like carrying a dozen of eggs across the rocky road.
Steel supports extend around the base of the narrow milk house to give it extra stability on the dirt road. The team are less worried about Rose's toilet. It takes a week to lift and move the buildings. At the new site, they slide the buildings into place, lining them up precisely with the surveyor's stakes. Moving Rose's 400-ton farmhouse may not be so easy.
I think it's incredible, and it went very quickly, faster than I would have thought. I think I'm going to have to be medicated when the house moves. Maybe a good shot.
Back in Nova Scotia, the movers are preparing to cut and dismantle Catherine's home into 4 pieces. They thread 8 15-meter-long steel beams through the house. These form a rigid platform under each section. Cranes hook onto the beams and prepare to lift each piece away. Jason is concerned that the exposed studs that form the walls may be too unstable to survive the lift.
Once we cut it, all the walls would be hanging from the roof trusses, and that would allow all the studs to swing whatever way they feel like. And they can bow in and they can bow out, and that's when you look down, you lie up the wall, and you'll see a wave and it's just in and out and in and out.
Once cut, the upstairs walls will be separated from the first floor. If left unbraced, the free-hanging walls would buckle, causing damage to the plasterwork. To prevent collapse, they will build a steel skeleton inside both roof sections. This ties all the walls together and provides a rigid base for the lift.
This is a piece of channel iron, and what we use it for is bracing. It goes up against the wall, and we bolt it into the studs. And what that does is when we cut the upper half off, it keeps the building square.
With the walls braced, the carpenters can begin cutting the house into 4 loads. It takes 2 days for the team to sever through over 200 beams.
All the studs, except for the corner beams, there and over there and over there, are all cut.
Now they've exposed the house to the elements, they must finish the job quickly to avoid rain wrecking the home.
There's no delay with this one. We got to make sure we're ready to go, and we got to make sure we can do it right away.
They need 2 cranes to lift the roof, one positioned at the rear of the house, the second at the front, parked on the main road. But just as they try to park this crane in position on the street, disaster strikes. The crane's brakes fail. Despite the valiant efforts of the crew, the 35-ton crane continues to gather momentum down the hill. The driver does his best to dodge obstacles, but somehow he must bring the crane to a stop. As the crane accelerates, the driver is running out of options. Ahead, he sees a low railway bridge. He jams the crane under the bridge to bring it to a halt. Luckily, no one is seriously hurt, but everyone is shaken by the incident.
We have to move our crane.
The day after the crane accident, the movers in Nova Scotia receive more bad news. A hurricane threatens to strike.
The remnants of Hurricane Beryl is coming up on the east coast of Nova Scotia. And it could be a tropical storm, but it could go veer more to the east, and we could just get heavy rain and a little bit of wind. But in Nova Scotia, you never know what we're going to have for weather, so.
They call in another crane. They must dismantle and move the house as fast as possible to beat the hurricane.
Yeah, just 1 second.
Jeff!
The right side of the roof is wedged into the left at a difficult angle. The movers would like to pull away this piece first, but there's not enough space on this side of the house to operate the cranes. So the team must relocate to the other side of the yard and remove the left section of roof first. This will not be easy. They must prise off the left side carefully, or the right side could be ruptured and leak when put back together. It's an anxious moment for Catherine.
Oh well, we'll see what they do with it. They just better damn well not drop it, or they're going to build me a new house from scratch.
We're jammed up against this other piece. Come on up in your boom just a whisker more, will you?
We're slowly coming away. and just skim across the top of the wall until I get out enough that I can bring it up.
Right there, she was holding out by these two side windows.
Okay, Jason, you come up in your boom a little bit. Come on up.
Spotters inside make sure the roof does not jam on the tall radiators as it swings out.
Everything look free, Jeff? Before you swing, you gotta clear the radiator.
Over the course of the afternoon, they lower the roof to the ground, where it will be prepared for the move.
It came apart good. Over to go back together is easy.
With the storm advancing, the team is now under tremendous pressure to hit the road. Back in St. Louis, John's team are preparing to lift Rose's farmhouse. The stone walls are half a meter thick. Cutting holes in them for the steel lifting rig is proving difficult.
Stone is tricky because it's layered in such a way, if you take out a whole stone, you're really weakening the wall at one point, so you have to make a cut on it, and to make a cut on an 18-inch stone is really difficult.
They must keep the 400-ton farmhouse perfectly level throughout the lift. If it tilts or leans, the wooden veranda or porch attached to the main brick structure could be compressed under the weight. So they're building a steel lifting rig through the basement walls. Small needle beams prop up the wooden weak spots. These rest on cross beams supporting the floor. 3 main beams run the length of the house, bearing as much as 160 tons. Jacks pushing under these beams will raise the house off its foundations. They must remove as little masonry as possible to accommodate the steel beams, or the walls will lose their strength. They score each hole precisely before lifting away the stones by hand. It takes the team over a week to drill the 80 holes John needs to thread the massive lifting beams right through the farmhouse. With the beams in place, John's brother Joe packs them tight to the stonework so all the walls lift in unison.
All the beams are level now, so we have to fill in all these voids for the needle beams, the main steel, the cross steel, whether by wedging, shimming, or grouting, but we have to fill all the voids, so when we finally put it in the unified mode, everything's getting picked all at the same level plane.
They position 17 jacks under the rig. The building's 400-ton weight is unevenly spread, so each jack will lift a different load. Hydraulics link the jacks to a bank of pressure gauges. Here, John adjusts the force he applies to each jack so the building lifts up evenly.
Once they have the load of the building, we'll supply whatever pressure that the individual jacks will need to raise the building up in a unified plane.
John powers up the jacks one by one. The jacks assume the full weight of the building. A crack appears around the base of the house as it begins lifting up off its foundations.
All right, I'm getting a lift on this bay over here. We've gone up about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. So we have a uniform crack all the way around, which is a good sign.
The crack means the entire building is now free of its foundations and ready to be raised up clear of the basement walls.
It's all free, so now everything should come up in unison.
I just want to make sure it stays level. Otherwise, I can see everything toppling on the inside, and that would not be a good thing.
Right now, it's coming up.
Now they need to raise the building up 1.5 meters into the air, so they have enough space under the structure to position the wheels for the move. Each time the jacks reach their full height, they transfer the weight onto a tower of wooden blocks so they can reset the jacks to lift again. As the building raises, they clear away the old foundations. Over the course of the day, the farmhouse rises up into the air. With the lift complete, their next challenge is to position 112 wheels under the house to propel it to its new location. With the storms in Nova Scotia advancing, Jason's team has no option but to try and move 2 sections of Catherine's house tonight. They have a narrow time window of just 5 hours to deliver the loads. With the hurricane forecast to strike Friday night, they need to move fast.
We're lucky right now. There was no clouds in the sky when the sun went down. So far, everything's going great for us, but it's Nova Scotia. It could change any minute.
Are we ready to go, Jason?
I'm ready to go, yeah.
Okay, let's go, buddy.
The 30-kilometer trip sets off at walking pace. The roof is the widest and tallest of the 4 loads, and its angular shape is difficult to maneuver through town.
Everything all right up there, Chris?
Perfect. Yeah, take it to your right, Philip. You got good 3 feet there. Take it to your right. Where's that pole there?
You're by this stoplight here now. Keep going.
The team has attached wooden boards to the rooftop to ease the apex under the wires. But some junctions are so heavily entwined, they must pick their way through by hand. It's 2:30 a.m. before they ride out of town. It's taken 1.5 hours for them to travel just 3 kilometers, and there are still 27 more to go. Their road permit expires at 6 a.m., so they're desperate to pick up speed on the highway. Led by a police escort, they hit 50 kilometers an hour. But just as they get going, another obstacle looms over the horizon.
The other day there, Steve, that we should just straddle that yellow line, the center line, right?
Yeah, that's going to be your best bet, I think.
If the roof is too high to pass under this bridge, they may have to turn back and find an alternative route.
How high is the house?
Right now, 16.2 and a half.
And how high is the bridge?
16.2.
So what are you going to do?
The suspension in the truck, you can dump your air, so you gain about 2 or 3 inches. See, the road crowns too, eh? So he's going to gain a little bit there because the tire's on the outside of the crown. And the only part that's high is the very front of that. After about 2 or 3 feet of the front of that peak, then it starts sloping off again.
The lowest point of the bridge does not have enough clearance for the gable roof. But the team has realized that the road is not precisely level. It's humped in the middle. If they align the rig's wheels either side of this crest, they will gain the few vital centimeters of headspace they need to pass through it.
So do you think you'll make it?
It's going to be tight.
The rooftop scrapes the bridge beams.
Which was the lowest side? This front side over here?
I heard something up there. I don't think we heard anything. The skid boards are running over top of each other.
The only thing it probably did was come up with the nails on the skid board.
To the relief of the team, they just squeezed through.
We've never been that close before.
But the hold-up has cost them precious time, and the first roof section does not reach the new site until 5 a.m.
I guess we estimated a little bit off. There was no mess-ups, no unseen problems, but just some things just end up taking longer than they're supposed to, right?
Their road permit has expired, so they must wait until tonight to move the second section of Catherine's house. After just 3 hours rest, the team are back at work. They are preparing the ground floor for tonight's move, so it can be reunited with its roof before the storm strikes.
They said Friday afternoon, late afternoon, it could start raining and then the winds could pick up. So we might just have to keep working tonight and right through and get the other two pieces over here, and then if they're here in the morning, and that's why we have to just keep going and working and working and working, and you know, sometimes there's just not enough time to sleep and lay down, so you just have to keep going until it's done.
They hit the road just after midnight. This time they're prepared for the obstacles en route and deliver the first half of the ground floor to the new lot by 4 a.m. The first stage of reassembly begins after breakfast.
What we're going to do is we got the bottom half here. This is the piece we moved last night. We landed it next to the foundation, and now we're going to pick it up and set it on with the cranes.
Lowering an old house onto new foundations is precarious. The walls of the house are warped with age and may not sit evenly on the perfectly level footings.
We'll be lifting the top part as level as possible, and we want to bring everything down at the same rate. We don't want to put pressure and stress on one part of the building over the other. So as long as we keep it level and we bring the cranes down together, then we won't have that problem.
Jason must realign both levels of wall studs precisely. It's now late afternoon and he's running out of light. The slightest slip or tug between beams could cause the entire wall to collapse.
You ready, Chris?
Yeah, copy it. Okay, coming down on your end, just your end, nice and easy. Coming down. Oh, hold that a sec.
Pretty much bang on in that corner.
Over here. It's coming back together really well.
They have over 100 wall studs to realign. Once lined up, the carpenters strengthen each joint with wooden ties. The team works through a third night, stitching the first two halves of the house together. But although the roof is now back on, the sides of the house are still exposed.
Hold that a sec.
Catherine watches anxiously, knowing the storm is just hours away. The movers have no time to lose. To complete the operation, they must rebuild the move rig for the second half of the house. If they reduce its width to under 6 meters, then they're allowed to travel on the road during the day. They lift the top floor carefully out of the way. They have to move the ground floor first so it can be positioned on the new lot before the roof section arrives.
The living room and dining room just went over the top of the roof.
Now the drivers are under enormous pressure to deliver both loads before the rain begins.
People haven't got a clue. You see an escort vehicle, it means there's something wide coming.
Get over! Get over! Pull over to the side!
Despite working day and night for the past 4 days, the storm finally catches them. High winds make it too dangerous for the movers to crane the roof into place tonight. But meanwhile, the carpenters realize they have made a terrible error. They stacked up all the historic woodwork removed from Catherine's house on the upper floor level, which is now exposed to the pouring rain. They scramble in the gales to wrap the exposed building in a tarpaulin, but it's too late. Water is already pouring onto the antique woodwork and floors. The skeleton of the wooden structure could be permanently warped. The following morning, the storm has subsided, and they lower the last piece of Catherine's house into place. But the damage has already been done. The tarpaulin blew off in the night, and water has penetrated the ceilings and plasterwork. Catherine may have underestimated the risks of moving such a precious house.
I thought that they were going to cut it up and that they would bring it over and put it down, but I didn't think of some of the other things, like now I've got to get some new chimneys in place. Those are things I didn't think about, and it's kind of ruined right now. So the whole house, it's all cosmetics, I think. Once they fix the walls, it's just going to be a matter of painting it. So those are things that you just don't think about when you're doing these things.
Before Catherine can reclaim her home, they will have to carry out extensive repairs and rebuilding. Wooden ties will need installing to realign the warped wall studs. New wiring and pipework will have to be run through the entire house. All the walls need relining with plasterboard. Joiners will have to replace the original wooden features inside, damaged beyond repair. And new siding will need securing around the exterior of the house to seal it up from the elements. It will be some time before Dr. Catherine's house is restored back to its historic splendor. It's 8:30 a.m. in St. Louis, the big move day for Rose's farmhouse. A narrow dirt road half a kilometer long points the way to its new foundations. John alerts his team to hazards en route.
Make sure nothing gets grabbed on the hoses. Watch the blocks popping up with the boards. If you see anything, yell. Let your zone leader know.
Larry, you want to say a little prayer?
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together and accomplish this task. We pray that you be with each one here today and keep them safe. Amen.
All right, let's go move the house, guys.
It's an emotional moment for Rose.
Here's to a new day for an old house for many generations to come. Okay.
The weather is overcast, but rain holds off for now.
It's a beautiful day for moving. You know why? Because it's dry.
Their first task is to haul the farmhouse out of its deep foundations. An engine on the front powers the wheels underneath as they set off at a snail's pace. They must guide the wheels precisely along these narrow gangways to make it up onto the road.
The sooner we get off the boards, the better it is, the safer the job is, and there'll be a lot more smiles on guys' faces.
Fast and just right.
It's a tight squeeze as they inch up onto the road. Spotters around the house ensure the rig remains absolutely level.
Everybody's looking for, just watching your hoses, watching the distances in your hydraulic cylinders. You don't want any to either stroke all the way out or or run all the way down flat. If that happens, you start hitting dead spots in your zones and it breaks up the plane, and that's when you start damaging the building. And so, yeah, it's best to just keep your eyes open, paying attention.
Once we get off of this hole, we'll be able to go a little smoother because we got to leapfrog all the boards and blocks up front to make our runway. So once we get on this gravel surface, we'll be able to stroll along pretty good. How are we looking in the rear? We looking all right?
It takes an hour for them to travel just 15 meters. At this speed, the move will take over 30 hours.
So far, so good. Got a long way to go, though.
We've got off our bridge, and we got up to steel plates and boards, and now we're getting ready to step off the steel plates and boards and see if the road holds up. If it doesn't, it's going to be a long trip.
Now the house is safely on the road, Jerry, John's uncle and lead driver, is anxious to crank up the pace.
I'm going to get them sweating in a minute. You watch this. We just got to get over there before it rains.
Jerry picks up the pace, but they veer off course towards the softer edge of the road. It's critical they hold the building back on track.
Yeah, we got to start sweeping. We got to start easing that way. We'll be way too high up. That's the center of the road, these flags. What's he want to go? All right, tighten your side up, Will.
They must wrench the 112 wheels round with chains and pulleys to line the house up with the central, more solid part of the road marked with flags.
Need to come back to you about 2 inches.
With the constant threat of rain overhead, the team works frantically throughout the morning, hauling the house to the new site. The ramp down to the new foundations is perilously steep.
The main thing is to keep an eye on your jacks because the terrain or the grade will change pretty drastically here in the next 200-300 feet. So basically a lot of tape measuring and measuring the cylinders to make sure there's enough ram to allow for the change of grade.
They anchor heavy machinery to the rear to stop the house running away downhill. The building leans forward at a precarious angle as it descends the slope. Spotters circle on the lookout for cracks and falling masonry. Keeping in mind Rose's insistence that all the buildings must be perfectly aligned, the final stage of the move is the most critical.
2 foot.
They must line up the walls of the farmhouse precisely on the new concrete foundations. They use plumb lines hung from the corners of the house to make sure they hit the drop zone spot on.
1 foot.
It's coming over real nice. Ooh, cut back.
Come back, Will. Good.
Said his end's good.
4.
The stake's leaning. Straighten the stake up.
3.
Bring it on, Joe.
2. Pretty close.
Bullseye. John parks the house precisely on target.
Wonderful. It's good to see it back here and it's in one piece. I knew you guys would do it though. There was no question ever in my mind.
Rose's farm is saved. In the spring, the shrubs and trees will be replanted to restore the homestead to its original glory.